Good morning. Happy Monday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand and it is perfect. All right. Had a pretty good weekend. Actually revamped the office a little bit, reorganized things, got it kind of looking the way I want it to look. Almost getting there. So feel pretty good about things. I'm going to dig straight into today's Q&A. This is with Alex. So Alex's question pertained to some shape change concepts, and so it started with the foot. When we talk about different shape changes, we talk about pelvis and we talk about thorax and things, but can we apply the same concepts to the foot? And the reality is yes, we can. In fact, there are already mobilizations and manipulations and such that are actually quite effective. I think that what was lacking in regards to the explanation and the reasoning in the past is that there just wasn't an effective model upon which we could base our thought processes and come up with a logical and reasonable presentation as to when these things are most effective. And I think once we do that with an effective model, then we become much more influential with our application of manual therapies. And so that's kind of the direction that we went here. We were looking at some examples as to how we would actually apply this and like in what context we would apply this for the most effective result. So thank you, Alex, for asking a great question that's going to help a lot of people. Everybody have an outstanding Monday, and I will see you tomorrow. All right, Alex. Thank you for your patience.
Good morning.
Greetings.
So in the same way that you can lie someone on the side, push on their pelvis and roll them forward and back to get AP expansion, I figure there's got to be a relatively easy way if you're holding someone's foot to do something similar. Just apply pressure in such a way as they move that you would get the AP expansion. I'm just not sure what it is. Maybe you've gone over it.
Oh, wait a minute. So hang on. What so you're trying to use a foot to create AP in the pelvis?
No, sorry. Literally just like AP expansion in the foot with my hands applying some pressure.
Yes.
That's my question.
I would agree. I would agree.
I would agree too. I just don't know what it is.
Okay. Well, okay. So hang on. So where would you have this anterior posterior expansion in the pelvis? At what point in a propulsive phase would you expect to have the greatest AP expansion?
Early.
Awesome. So what's an early foot look like?
I mean, ER plantar flexed, first ray, ER subtalar joint.
Yeah. Hang on. Let me
high arch.
Let me grab the foot. Yeah. So hang on. Turn my toes around. Here we go. Yeah. So it's going to look like that, correct? Right. So I can take the foot and turn it like this so that I'm looking at the bottom of the foot. You see the groove?
Mm-hmm.
That was made to put your thumb right there. See it? You ever do a cuboid manip on a foot?
Yeah, that's the same position.
Yep, that's what it is. Yeah, it's like a cuboid position.
So you can do the cuboid whip. Could you also? I mean, I assume you can also just apply some pressure.
Absolutely.
Tell them to breathe it out.
Yep, absolutely. You can. Absolutely, you can.
Do you bias your pressure to the entire foot?
What I'm trying to do is create a shape. So it's like, where do I have to put the pressure to create the shape that I want, right?
So in that situation, you're like burritoing it.
Yes, yeah. So you're kind of like doing one of those deals, right? I'm trying to create because I gotta get an ER shape. So I don't want this flattened representation of a middle P foot, right? I got to create the curve, right? So I'm going to close those spaces in, so to speak. So you've got an axis of rotation in the fifth ray, you got an axis of rotation in the first ray, then you're going to close that space together between your hands, right? And then the thumb fits right in there. And then it's just a matter of being coherent with extremity position, right? To allow the ER shape.
Yeah. So, I mean, would I potentially get a greater benefit if I'm just trying to create like the AP expansion of getting them to like lie on that same side hip on their side, just like literally have them be in that position.
To get the AP?
Yeah.
Potentially, yes.
Or could I hold that foot position and like tug on their leg and guide them into a roll? Would there be of any benefit?
You had me at tug on that leg, actually.
Stop there.
Well, I didn't say stop there, but you had me there because that's actually one of the all-time great strategies that is underappreciated.
Just
If you do it on the correct leg at the correct time. Okay, that's the question mark. Because
would that just be
so
like an early
did
leg?
they teach you how to pull on somebody's leg in school?
Yeah.
You cut out for a second. I missed the great answer. I'm gonna restate my question. They taught you how to pull on somebody's leg?
Yes.
When did they say to do it? What's the presentation? What's the presentation when that technique is successful?
They have back pain.
So non-specific mechanical back pain solutions. Let's break out the back pain cookbook and we will go through this process. And I must pull on the second toe at an angle of 32 degrees relative to the third toe. I mean, come on. No, hang on a second. Wonder Mud needs to go outside. Sorry about that. No, it's like so think about this for a sec, okay? Set up the foot like we just talked about. Okay. So you're looking at the plantar aspect of the foot, fair?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What position would your patient and or client be in under that circumstance for you to be able to see the bottom of their foot?
Prone.
Perfect. Okay. So would you be taking that foot across the other leg under that circumstance if you were trying to get an ER bias, or would you move it away from midline slightly under that circumstance?
Away from midline.
Awesome. What position are you in there, young man? If they were taking a step forward, which foot would be stepping forward and which one would be back towards you?
I mean, the one you're holding would be stepping forward.
Okay, but now you've moved them away from midline.
So they'd be stepping away from you.
Okay. So I've created some interference, right?
Yeah.
I got an early foot and I got a late pelvis. You see it?
Yes.
Okay. That doesn't make it a bad thing. It just tells you where everything's going to stop. But this then becomes useful. Okay. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating the energy transfer, right, with your hands.
Mm-hmm.
So where's it going to stop?
At the knee, the pelvis.
Because you created the stop there.
Okay.
So what shape change do you need to create? What is the goal of this activity then in regards to shape change? Is it to change the pelvis?
Yeah, so you're making it more focal to the foot in that situation.
And
the lower leg.
And
the upper leg.
But not
the pelvis.
Yes.
Okay.
That's when you do it, and that's when it's successful. So when I need the ER representation, of the lower extremity, right? Okay. So if I have a compressed extremity,
mm-hmm.
that's an extremity that has more IR compression, right? It's a more downward compression. It's like if I have to alleviate that, you just did the activity that's going to provide you the solution.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand and it is perfect. All right. Already a productive week. It's only Tuesday. So let's dig straight into today's Q&A. This is with Dante. Dante had a question in regards to connective tissue behaviors and how those influence activities such as rolling, and why we use rolling to such levels of effectiveness. We have to consider the fact that we've got a position where we're altering gravity. So that's going to immediately change the influence of internal forces, external forces, and our response to those. And so right away we get a tuning down of muscle activity that we typically are going to be trying to influence to restore relative motions. We have altered the internal forces, so the direction that those take place have also been altered. We also have the pressure of the ground and the associated gravity pushing down, which is going to influence our motor output. Take into consideration the fact that all of your guts are falling towards the ground. That's going to promote some shape change. So we get a really big bang when we're talking about these rolling activities. The one you select is going to depend on what the needs are of the individual, obviously. But we've got a lot of potential influences here with rolling activities in regards to what type of an output that we're going to get. So Dante, thank you so much for asking this question. Everybody have an outstanding Tuesday, and I will see you tomorrow. Go ahead, Dante.
Hi, Bill. I hope today's question will be short. I have two questions. One was about the movement, and another was steer. I still have some question between the muscle activity and the connective tissues behaviors, right? As I am AP compression, anterior and posterior compression, that means my muscle in front and behind my back is really anterior orientation, right? So we need to create some expansion.
There would typically be anterior orientation associated with it, yes.
Okay, and so I'm trying to do something just like the right side lying and roll forward, backward, backward, and that will create the expansion on my right back if I did right.
Well, so if are you rolling past midline? So straight up and down. Like shoulders right on top of each other, hips right on top of each other.
Yeah. And forward and back.
If you roll the top side forward, you're going to create the delay representation on the downside.
Yeah.
If I roll past midline back in the other direction, if you're doing it correctly, you would create the delay on the upside. So you're laying dead center middle on your side, and you're doing
I understand this. Okay. So my question is, delay was describing the connective tissue, right? So the delay means yielding on the connective tissue.
That is correct.
But how the yielding of connective tissue can change the muscle activity of can change the muscle activity.
Because all the sense, so your connective tissue is filled with sensory cells that sense pressures and tensions, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any pressure downward?
What do you mean?
Pressure downward.
Okay.
So you feel that, right? Okay. Yeah. Awesome. That feeds back into the nervous system, right? Okay. You're breathing as you do this. So we're using tidal breathing. We're trying to create this influence of tidal breathing through the system. Okay. Are you working hard against gravity?
If I'm standing, yes.
But we're rolling. We're on your side, rolling.
No.
Okay. So there's less gravity. So that requires less muscle activity. So right away, we've acquired a position that creates pressure, that reduces gravity. So the motor output for me to hold this position is immediately lessened. So I don't need as much muscle activity to begin with.
Okay.
Then I start to move through these excursions. What's the rule? When you're performing short arc rolls, do you try to feel hard stretch?
Nope.
No, why not? Because I don't want to create an influence of tension, of increased tension associated with pulling on connective tissues.
Yeah.
So that's why we use the pressure and not pull, because the response is going to be different. So if I pull on connective tissues, my muscles tend to want to tense up and protect.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
if I create a pressure, then there tends to be this expansive quality associated with that, because it's going to promote more eccentric orientation associated with it. So if somebody was doing a massage on you, okay, so they're doing like effleurage, so they're using pressure, and so they're using pressure to influence a favorable response in regards to the muscle activity. So they're trying to tune down muscle activity with pressure. If I wanted to ramp it up, I would yank on something.
Yeah.
Thus the failure of static stretching in regards to changing joint orientation.
Okay.
You see the
Yeah.
difference?
So yeah, I understand. So that is something always confused me, because
Yeah.
I cannot connect the two parts, the muscle and connective together.
Okay, so
And
here's what I would do is I would try to understand the sensations that are associated with how connective tissue behaves. Like, again, so there's different types of receptors that respond to different things that promote a different, like entirely different responses. So your response to pressure and your response to tension are not the same. And so that's what we're talking about here. That's why certain activities are better for reducing concentric orientation. Some activities are lousy at it. Okay. That's why, again, static stretching has a place. When people say it doesn't work, they don't understand what it does. It just doesn't do what people think it does or want it to. Okay. It has its place. It has use. But when we're trying to reduce motor output, okay, positions, pressures, etc., are the bigger influence here. Okay.
thank you.
Good morning. Happy Wednesday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand, and it is perfect. All right. Coming up on a busy Wednesday, quick reminder, 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, Coffee and Coaches conference call as usual. Grab yourself a cup of coffee, join us for some Q&A. Great people, great questions. Learn a little something, get your Thursday off to a great start. So again, Coffee and Coaches conference call, 6 a.m. tomorrow on Zoom. Link will be on my professional Facebook page just prior to the call. Digging into today's Q&A, this is with Matt. Matt had a great question on push-ups. I think that push-ups are one of those exercises that is prolific, but done poorly in many situations. Number one, I think it's misunderstood as to what a good push-up should be. And number two, I don't think there's a strong recognition of the compensatory strategies. They're a little bit more difficult to see in the upper body than they are in the lower body, especially when we're talking about orientations of the thorax. It's usually easy to see the orientation of the pelvis because we've got a much more limited representation of what is possible because the pelvis is just a little bit stiffer than the thorax. So again, some of these things are difficult to identify, but we break those down pretty good as far as what we think should be happening in the push-up. So thank you, Matt. Great question. Appreciate it very much. Everybody have an outstanding Wednesday. I will see you tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Coffee and Coaches conference call.
Go ahead, Matt. She's giving up her turn.
Oh man, I've had a hurry.
What's the rule at the intensive? You can give up your turn one time, right?
Okay, I'll make it quick. So, looking at some deviations I'm seeing in people executing push-ups, and they're running out of room and coming up with some pretty standard IR strategies to get through it. And a little bit of confusion for me is when the arm is in a position behind the body. So let's say they're getting to the end of the push-up, Are we looking for anterior expansion there in order to complete that range of motion? Because trying to think of it as an early, middle, late representation in normal shoulder flexion, I get that. But once it is in a position behind the body, is that considered to be late as well? And if so, are we looking for an anterior expansion in order to get through that position?
This is going to depend on, so when you say it's behind the body, I would argue that it's not. I would say that it's away from the body. So it's moving towards, it's going to move towards ER under that circumstance.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So if it's moving towards ER, there's probably not a delay there, is there?
No.
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 So in that respect, where would they be running out of space if they're having to
Well, there is no space there. So why would they move into that position to begin with?
trying to acquire IR, I guess, is the only answer there, isn't it?
Yeah. So how do they do it?
Well, the compensations that the IR compensation that I'm seeing that is either going to be a forward head or the reaching, shrugging of the shoulders. Yep. So they generally from scap up, rotate, they anterior orient from there.
Stop right there. Stop right there. Stop right there. Stop right there. You're describing anterior orientation of the thorax.
Yes.
That's what's happening.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So literally, they're already moving into this late representation because of the force demands are so great. So they reduce their relative motions almost immediately, and they're lowering themselves into the push-up. You've seen this, right? The people that do push-ups like that, right? So all they're doing is creating an anterior orientation, and you see their chin, right?
Yeah.
They use their chin to do push-ups, right?
Yeah.
And then their booty sticking up in the air.
Or
unless they grab the $100 bill with their behind, right, and squeeze that closed.
No, IR through the lumbar spine.
So I'm sorry, you're cutting out a little bit. What?
IR through the lumbar spine as well as the next compensation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So they need force production.
Yeah.
Right. And so they have to create a bunch of orientations. And so ER orientation out and up, IR orientation down towards the ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a lot of relative motion going on there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So they're just showing you how hard it is, right? And so and you get to choose like to what degree the compensations will be allowed. Because think about this, during force production, you're going to lose relative motions, right? The question mark is how much, right? Do they lose it very, very quickly, or do they lose it at the end of the motion, which is where it should disappear, right? That's a good push-up and a bad push-up. Is like at the end of a good push-up, there's still no relative motion, but you had relative motions to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. So
now Jake's my head nodder. Thanks, Jake.
So
I'm making sense today, folks.
When the arm's behind the body in an exercise such as a dip, for instance, how would you describe that arm position relative to? Is that are we faced with the same thing? That's just really an ER position.
Matt, it's entirely dependent on the degree of excursion that's taking place.
Okay.
Because again, it's like once you descend past where you have access to internal rotation, you have to move out into an ER space. So if you see somebody descending into a dip and they say, I need to use full range of motion, it's like, well, okay, full range of motion of what? Right? So then you start to see the elbows deviate away from midline, right? You see the anterior orientation of the thorax as they descend into the dip,
Yeah.
right? That is an ER orientation, anterior orientation to access that space.
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah. Yeah.
As you descend, you should be absorbing the internal rotation, right? So that would be an early representation in the descent of a dip until you hit the end of what you have available. Then you have to create orientations to finish it if you go farther.
So, yeah. Okay. So as soon as we get the arm essentially behind the line of the body, it all turns into orientation from that point forward.
Again, you have to define behind the line of the body, because I would respectfully disagree that it's not.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That's all right. That's solve some problems in my head.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Good morning. Happy Thursday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand, and it is perfect.
All right. So I had a pitching question. Weird.
Huh.
And I know.
That's so weird that you always have to come up with this.
Gotta bring baseball in.
Understood.
So this might be coincidence that I've seen this with the last few players I've been working with, which is as they go, let's say it's a right-handed pitcher and they're getting into their lead leg, as they plant into stride foot contact and they start to turn, they're leaving that kind of right side open and they're not getting that pelvis to turn around. And I don't know if is it that they can't,
They're facing third base. They're still facing third base.
Yeah. And is it that they cannot get the pelvis to turn left, and or they're keeping the right ISA open, like lower ISA open? Are those paired together?
Okay, so there you go. So this is really good. So yeah, so think about okay, if you are standing on the third baseline and you are looking at just from the waist down, you look at lower extremity shape, put that on the rib cage. That's what you're looking at. There's your turn. So they're not anchoring the lead leg to turn into internal, so they got to start to internally rotate more. So they're landing in their early representation. This is the first superimposition of internal rotation. Then they need to increase it to get to their max P on the left side. So they're not getting into that position. So your representation is correct as far as what is being represented there.
Okay. And then, so follow up to that, when I look at their ISA on the table, can they open, can they close? It appears that the right side looks closed, like the angle on the right ISA is more,
Which part?
vertical, the lower. So doing it this way, they look more closed on the right side, and
Yep,
looks like
but they got like an ER foot on that right side, correct?
Yes, on one of them for sure. The other one I can't remember.
Like that would be the first place that I would look. That would be the first place that I would look. So think about this. So as they're stepping towards home plate, instead of driving the late IR representation that would move them in the direction of home plate, they have an ER representation. Again, so the ISA would be open on that side, and it would be almost as if the right lower extremity is ERing towards second base, which again it just prevents them from moving towards home plate. So they have to be able to push into that late IR representation because they've got an early IR representation that they have to capture on the lead leg.
Okay.
So I would look at this as a right-sided problem.
Okay. Yeah, I got that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then
go ahead.
The other piece that this could be total coincidence or maybe related, and that's kind of the other piece of the question, is they also lose like their back toe. So meaning like there's not a drag mark to go with it because it starts to drag, but then it pops up. And I
Yeah.
didn't know what, like, are they losing that back foot because like they
Okay.
can't get into IR on the front leg, they anteriorly orient instead, and that dumps the pelvis this way, taking the back foot off?
So their feet become essentially too far apart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is my lead foot. So my right foot wants to go this way.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so how do you get downforce into the lead foot?
We have to orient down, right?
So I have to pick everything up on the back side. I
Yeah.
literally have to pick it up and dump it onto the front leg, right? So that's gonna lift the right foot up off the ground instead of dragging it through. So if I had IR, then I could go
Yep.
straight through. So this is, and you know, we talk about drag marks, like the shape of drag marks. Like whenever you see a curve, that's an ER, ER compensatory strategy. When they have IR, they go straight, like it's a straight line drag mark, right?
Yep.
So if I can't produce the IR on the right side for the right-handed pitcher, I have too much ER, can't push down into the ground. I have to get the weight to the front leg. It's just pick it up and dump it over onto the lead leg, so the foot goes up off the ground.
Got it. Okay. Cool. That was great. Thank you.
Good morning. Happy Friday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand, and it is perfect. All right. A very busy Friday coming up. We're going to dig straight into today's Q&A. This is with Zach. Zach is working with some elastic resistance activities. Typically, when we talk about this, we're talking about using them on the vertical, say in a box squat situation where we might have a band resisted type of squat activity or a band assisted squat activity where we're trying to influence gut behaviors and connective tissues. But we can also use these on the horizontal, so to speak, when we're talking about changes of direction and such. But we're still dealing with the same issues. We're still dealing with how we're going to influence gut behavior. We're still going to influence connective tissue behavior because we're dealing with time. What the elastic resistance allows us to do is to influence acceleration, so we can have positive accelerations or negative accelerations that will allow us to either buffer some of these forces or augment these forces and actually increase the acceleration, which will again influence how much internal force that we have to manage and then how much load on the connective tissue behaviors. So this is going to be a great question for a lot of people. So thank you, Zach, for bringing it up. Podcast will be up on Sunday as usual. Everybody have an outstanding weekend, and I will see you next week.
All right. Well, that's fun. That's a good way to start. Zach, where are you? Did you get kicked out of the house or something, dude?
No. I'm down in Florida right now with your friend Lee Taft.
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him? Yeah, never heard of you.
Never
either.
heard of him. Wouldn't know Lee Taft if I fell over him.
All right, I'll make sure to let him know that.
I love that guy. I still remember the day we met. Actually, and it was long. I had a lot more hair, and I think Lee's hair was still brown. Actually, so that's how long ago it was.
Funny.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like it would be wrong for me to not have a question related to change of direction for this morning.
Sweet.
So yesterday was a lot of going over just like his kind of like 7 patterns, his model for each of the patterns and like what he's looking for. And then he likes to use bands a lot to drive like an intent, almost like a corrective, like thing, like I forget like the exact word that gets used, but like a reactive, like if I'm pulling you this way, then your response is to go that way. I'm just kind of thinking of the context of how we've talked about bands sometimes in like a weightlifting scenario where it's mimicking the connective tissue behaviors.
Yes.
Now I'm trying to, and hoping you can kind of help guide me through the use of bands with like change direction. Like I'm almost assistant. I'm thinking I can see the connective tissue behavior. If it's I'm stretching the band as I go into a cut and then it assists me out of it. But then like if we flip that and it's resisted on the way out, that's not quite what the connective tissues are doing. And then same thing for like acceleration. Like if I'm having a band pull me backwards as I do that, just kind of working through those.
Yeah. Elastic resistance can be very, very helpful, or it could be massive amounts of interference, or it could be intentional interference, from a dampening perspective. So, and that's one of the things that Lee's really good at is, I always tell Lee, it's like, more physics than most people know physics, and he doesn't know any physics, but he does, right? So he did it like through pure practical application. That's how he figured out all this stuff. Like literally watched hours of film and practiced and went out, and he was probably on basketball courts all by himself for hours at a time. But anyway, what I would do when you're dealing with the application of the resistance on the horizontal versus the vertical, like the way we talk about it a lot with like box squats and things like that. And Lee applies that much more on the horizontal. All right. Look at that from the influence on the internal dynamics first. And that'll probably be the best way to capture what he is trying to do. So when you go into elastic resistance, okay, it's a dampening effect, right? So if you were to try to accelerate into a rubber band, right, that it's going to increase the amount of time that you spend on the ground. Okay, so the total impulse could be increased, but you're increasing the duration of the application. So normally what I would do if I was cutting off my right foot, so I'm going to jab into the ground with my right foot, I'm going to change direction, right? My guts are going to be a little bit behind me under those circumstances, right? So I land, the guts come slamming back into the right side, I turn, my body turns and starts to change direction, and then my guts swing along for the ride, okay? Slow all of that process down when you're going into the resistance. Okay. So as you pull into the cut with the rubber band, okay, that's going to turn you faster than you normally would. So that's increasing the acceleration. Okay. And that's going to bring the guts into the cut faster, right? As I move against the resistance, I'm going to come out slower. Okay. All right. Again, increased duration of application. And then the gut behavior is going to be slower coming out of the cut. Useful for rehabilitative circumstances. So like when you're working with all of the ACLs that you get, and you're starting to reintroduce changes of direction, it may behoove you to dampen the forces. Okay.
Dampen the forces just from the standpoint that like, I don't want them moving that quickly.
Correct.
Like I'm picturing like on the overcome out, like that's not the part, like if I'm introducing a change direction for the first time, like that part really wouldn't scare me in a sense, or I think really scare them. It would be like the going into it and loading it, which I think like speeding that up might scare them.
Right. So again, so now think about what direction that you would apply the dampening forces. Okay. Turn it around, have them go into the cut against the resistance.
And just not come back out of it initially.
Right. Correct. Again, teaching them to dampen those forces. So this is where again, you're going to increase time. Right. So this is like this. It's like putting somebody on a trampoline and increasing the duration of the yield. Right. You're playing with time. Right. And so now you are talking about connective tissue behavior. Right. But if you look at the internal forces, and then you look at how much of a delay that you're creating, like how fast is the body turning relative to what's going on inside. And then you can sort of see the like, and I always compare it to like waves crashing into the rocks. It's like, how hard do you want the wave to crash into the rocks? And that's determined by how quickly you move the body into a position. Because the guts are going in the same direction. They're just coming with a slight delay relative to the body, right? And that's what you're manipulating with elastic resistance.
Is there a, so I can see like from a performance standpoint, I can see the benefit really easily of, so like the band will resist me on the way out. So like coming into the cut, teaching them to handle like more forces and internal forces than they might be able to generate on their own. Is there a performance reason that you might want to dampen the way out? Or is that kind of like, because it's almost slowing them down?
It is. Okay. So then this becomes, all right. So now we got to talk about impulse. Okay. So impulse is force times time. Okay. So if there is a time constraint, so we could use the baseball pitcher analogy. Okay. Baseball pitchers have a time constraint, right? At a certain point in time, they don't have a choice. They have a very small window of time to apply forces to the baseball. Okay. If you teach them to increase the duration, right, to try to increase the force output, you can actually slow them down. Okay, because again, I'm increasing the duration of the ground contact. If you're trying to increase force production without the concern of the time constraint, then you can slow them down, right? And again, there is a point in time where this might be valuable, and then there's certainly a point in time where this is actually interference.
So this part of it almost becomes the same conversation as like a squat.
It would be in the same conversation as a squat. It's
similar,
not the same. It's still not the same because you've got an elastic resistance. So you have to increase the force output as the resistance increases, right? You're increasing the duration of your middle P.
Gotcha.
And then you decide it's like, okay, is that useful at this point, or does it become interference? So like if you had like a healthy sprinter, right, running into resistance would have a very limited value, right, unless they are having trouble with their absolute force production or absolute impulse production. You got to teach them to push harder first, then you take the resistance away, and then you apply it within the time constraint. Okay, because that's what you're playing with the resistance is time.
So you're saying with the healthy sprinter, like at max V, just the time constraint is so significant that anything that's going to slow that
at max what?
At max velocity, like the time constraint is so significant.
If you're trying to train max velocity with rubber resistance, I would question your thought process.
Well, so I guess that was the last part of the question. From like a resistance standpoint, either with acceleration, probably more acceleration, you'll see either the elastic resistance or you'll see like change.
Yes, because the ground contact times are longer in acceleration. And since you're working with Lee, you'll see Lee use that a lot in like the first few steps of like if he's doing anything, change direction, regardless of which direction he's going, you will see him use it in that short window. Because again, it's like if I'm trying to increase velocity, the last thing I want to do is well, I don't want to increase the force application, the duration of the force application, because again, that becomes interference.